Welcome to Advocating for Dads with Jana Jones.
Welcome to Advocating for Dads, the podcast where we dive into family law issues and provide practical advice to fathers navigating the complexity of custody, divorce, and separation. I'm your host, Sophia Morales, and joining me is Jana K. Jones, a dedicated family law attorney who's been serving fathers in North Carolina since 2009. If you're a father in North Carolina, you won't want to miss the advice that Jana has to offer on how to create a separation agreement that works for you and your children. Today's episode is dividing the details, what dads need to know about property and debt in divorce. So welcome, Jana. I'm happy to have you back with us.
Great to see you again, Sophia.
So let's dig into this. What does equitable distribution mean in a North Carolina divorce, and how is that different from equal?
Sure. Equitable distribution means fair, not necessarily equal. However, in North Carolina, equitable distribution starts from a default idea that it is going to be an equal or 50-50 split. Okay. It's going to include any assets or liabilities that were incurred from the date of marriage to the date of separation. It does not matter whose name is on the property. So for instance, let's say you have a business that you started after you got married and, it's your business. You don't have your spouse on it anywhere. That technically is still going to be subject to equitable distribution. Or if you purchase a home together or a car in your own name, that's still going to be subject to equitable distribution. Money that you put into your retirement account or investment accounts separately or together, that's all subject to equitable distribution. And it's also going to include liabilities like credit card debt, tax debt, lines of credit, mortgages on those properties, and things of that nature.
Let me ask you a question, because there are things that we think of as like uniquely ours. You mentioned the business, it would be one example, but let's say I inherit from my parents, for example. Is that also going to be subject under that if that inheritance happens during the marriage?
No, not as long as you do not commingle it and make it a marital asset. So let's say that a family member passes away and they leave a property to you only, not to you and your spouse. That will stay your separate property so long as you don't sell it, take the money, and put it into a marital account. Now you have taken something that was a separate asset and you've made it marital. But outside of that, as long as you hold it separately, you receive it separately, and you do not commingle it, it should still be your separate property.
Okay. Are there other ways we could accidentally commingle it by like paying a mortgage on it with marital funds?
Absolutely. Or using money from there to make a down payment on a marital home. All of that can kind of muddy the waters and make it very difficult for you to make an argument that something should be considered separate property.
Okay. So if you have something like that, good idea to talk to an attorney.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. And so are there other pieces of property that are not subject to that equitable distribution besides like that inheritance?
Inheritance gifts that are made solely to one spouse, again, so long as they don't end up commingling it. Those are usually the most common two things that are going to be separate property that come into the marriage after the party's been married. But what is also separate property is anything that you owned prior to the marriage that, again, you do not turn into a marital asset by commingling. So let's say you owned a home before you got married. So long as you never add their name to the deed or the mortgage on that property and you keep it separate, it will remain your separate property.
So when we're looking at things that are, I want to say, under our name, you mentioned the business, you mentioned a retirement account. How are those assets handled as you're going through this process? Do you get to kind of keep it, or do you have to like sell, or how does all this work?
So the court likes to do what we call in-kind distributions, meaning they're not going to make you sell everything and, minus out all the liabilities. And then, you've just got a pot of money, each of you does. We like to do in-kind distributions where maybe somebody takes this account, this other person takes that account. I take this car, you take that car, you keep your retirement, but I'm going to get more equity out of the home maybe when we sell it, or you're going to refi it and give me more money out of the refi. So we like to keep things in kind because when you do have to sell, that typically means we've got more of a longer drawn out process and we've got more ambiguity and we don't necessarily know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I could see that. And what happens typically with marital debt? Things like credit cards, loans, car loans, that kind of thing.
So that stuff gets split generally down the middle, unless there is some debt that's a non-marital purpose. So, for instance, if you have credit card debt and some of that credit card debt is because you took someone that you were having an affair with out on vacation or out to dinner or, stay at a hotel, then conceivably that debt could be backed out of being marital and be your separate debt. And then only the debt that's considered marital would be split.
Okay. And so if we're dealing with like a loan that was taken out for the business or business credit card, is that like calculated in with that asset, or is that considered a marital debt also?
So if it's of the business, if it's truly like a credit card, say, for the business, then no, what the court is going to be looking at is the value of the business. And so the value of the business is what's going to be split. If there is no value, then there's nothing to split, right? But if you have a profitable business, and generally, this is not something that I am going to figure out. I did not go to school to value this. There are very smart people who like math who are the ones who will value businesses. And they'll be able to tell us based on tax returns, statements, and things of that nature, what the value of the business is. And that way we know what we're splitting.
All right. That sounds good. So how can a father protect themselves from being stuck with what they consider an unfair debt or missing out on a potentially valuable asset?
So the most important thing is to figure out the classification of all your assets and liabilities, to understand that kind of going in. And so you know what to expect, and to make sure that you have a clear picture of your financial situation. A lot of times we find out that some parties they weren't aware of an account, or they didn't know about this business, or they didn't know about that debt. They didn't even know they had that credit card, right?
Yeah.
That can be pretty difficult to swallow when you're going through an already traumatic and dramatic situation. But unfortunately, the court will consider all marital assets and all marital liabilities when they're determining what is going to be an equitable distribution of the party's estate.
Okay. Now, back to that equitable distribution and the fairness situation. You said we start from a presumption of equal and 50-50. What kind of things can shift that in one direction or another to move from strictly 50-50 to fair but not equal?
So I think a common example would be if something is used for a non-marital purpose. So going back to my earlier example, if you've got a lot of credit card debt, one party has a lot of credit card debt, but that debt was incurred for a non-marital purpose, conceivably that debt should be backed out of the marital estate, and so it's not going to be a true 50-50 split. So you may have a credit card that has $10,000 on the date of separation. Instead of it being $5 going to each side, maybe it's only $2,500 going to the party that has nothing to do with the affair, and $7,500 going towards the party that did have the affair.
And so let's look back at the whole process and what the court's considering. Do they take into account who earned what and who paid for things when they're dividing property? For example, if you've got like a primary breadwinner and someone who's a stay-at-home caretaker, does that factor into this at all?
No, actually it doesn't. And that's the whole purpose of equitable distribution. When you are in a state that is like a title state, where they only go by whose name is on stuff, that is a situation where the person who stayed home is probably going to get the short end of the stick, right?
Yeah.
They didn't earn income. If they don't have credit, if nothing is in their name, then they have nothing to show for it if they get divorced. And North Carolina wanted that to be different. And that is why we have equitable distribution, because it shouldn't matter whose name is on it. The parties work together to create this estate. Or that debt. And so they share and share alike, right? So if you have a classic example of maybe a stay-at-home wife or mom and a husband who went out and worked and earned a good living and was able to acquire quite a bit of properties or assets in their name because maybe they didn't need to add their wife to things, maybe her credit wasn't good or various reasons why, then when they go to that divorce, she's entitled to half. She was there supporting him, supporting those kids. She's entitled to half of whatever it is that he was able to acquire. And that is the purpose of equitable distribution.
I like that. Seems sensible to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're supposed to be working as a team. So it is a share alike situation.
Very good. So what are some smart first steps that a dad can take as he's preparing for this equitable distribution negotiation?
So the first thing is to talk to an attorney. Okay. Equitable distribution is not one of those things that you want to try to figure out on your own or DIY. There are a lot of steps to equitable distribution in North Carolina. There are a lot of court dates involved. There are affidavits. There's mandatory discovery. There's mandatory mediation. So ideally, you do not go this road alone. At a minimum, if you cannot afford full representation, get a consultation so that you understand exactly what is going on and what you can expect down the road and any pitfalls to try to avoid.
That sounds like really sound advice. There are moments where you just need a professional. Sounds like this is one of them.
Absolutely.
What final words of wisdom would you have for the fathers out there who are going down the road of separating and sorting out the assets?
So have a clear picture of your estate, both your assets and your liabilities, and then get in touch with a family law attorney, ideally my firm if you're in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg County area, and get an understanding of what you can expect to happen. And then see if you guys are as far apart as, you fear. If you are, then, court is probably going to be the road you're going down. If you're maybe not as far apart as you thought you were going to be, then a separation agreement could be a really good resource for you and make things a lot smoother, easier, less expensive, and obviously less litigious.
Yeah, which is a beautiful thing for everybody but the lawyers. No offense, Jana.
Honestly, it is for me too. Again, my goal is to get people to the other side of this. I'm not looking for ways to nickel and dime, and I'm not the type of attorney that's looking to ratchet it up for, the purpose of just arguing for arguing's sake. I'm going to protect my client's interests. However, where we can come together and work together to get a resolution that both parties can live with and not have to spend the time, energy, money, stress that is litigation, then I'm more than happy to help facilitate that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for all this insight today.
Absolutely. Great to see you again.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us on Advocating for Dads with experienced family law attorney Jana K. Jones. To connect with Jana, head to the law office of jkj.com and be sure to like, subscribe, review, and share with those you care about.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos like this one.